Society and by the Labour MP Rushanara Ali. Welcome to both of you. Rushanara Ali, is there anything realistically that the West, the European Union, the British government can actually do to solve this conflict?
Well, we need the European Union and including the British government to work together to show leadership and also to act as an honest broker. And what we've seen yet again is that Israel has shown complete disregard for humanitarian issues. Some 600 people are now dead, mainly civilians, 100,000 seeking refuge. And we need the European Union to be a strong voice in recognising, of course, Israel needs to maintain its security, but its reaction and response is not proportionate, and we need the European Union, including the British government, to speak up and work towards resuming peace negotiations, which have been completely elusive over recent years.
How does Israel maintain its security without this sort of violence that escalates?
Well, this sort of violence and the death of so many people, particularly Palestinians, of course there have been casualties on the Israeli side as well, but the vast majority have been Palestinians, won't secure Israel, won't provide long-term security. What we need is the international community to work together. But also, Israel needs to respect international humanitarian law, international law generally, and that's not happening.
Has Israel disregarded humanitarian and international law by going into Gaza in the way they have?
No, not at all. Apart from anything else, the very muted response, and indeed in many cases a very encouraging response for Israel from the international community, is, I think, testament to the fact that it is playing not just by the rules, but by the most stringent rules imaginable. The reason why the casualties exist in the Gaza is obviously because Israel is trying, as an operational objective, to stop Hamas and other jihadist groups from firing rockets into Israel. In order to do that, Israel is carrying out a very, very targeted campaign. Now, it is inevitable in that civilians are going to be killed as well. And one of the reasons why that is happening... Excuse me, if I just finish. One of the reasons why it's targeted, because they are trying to get the launch pads that the rockets are coming from. Now, one of the reasons why there is a problem from this, of course, is that Hamas has, and incidentally CNN has the tape of this, among others, has been encouraging the people of Gaza to, quote, protect the houses of Hamas commanders, to actually congregate around areas which the Israelis have dropped leaflets and texted civilians to say this area is going to be hit. Hamas has actually tried to maximise the casualties. So that's the first point. As for how this is to be stopped, I think there's a very important thing that we do not, the international community does not simply perpetuate this conflict in trying to stop Israel from achieving the operational objective of stopping the rocket fire. The international, this is the third time now that this has happened.
Well,
and I would suggest...
It's more than the third time,
no,
actually.
The third time there's been this exchange since 2007.
Right. OK. I mean, we'll look at the operational and what actually both sides are hoping to achieve. But Rushanara Ali, you told a demonstration at the weekend that David Cameron had failed to show international leadership. My party is with you and the Labour Friends of Palestine are with you. Do you have Ed Miliband's support for your line on this conflict?
Well, Ed Miliband has made it absolutely clear that the incursion, the ground incursion, he said this only yesterday as well, the ground incursion is not one that is supported. We recognise Israel's demand, as Ed Miliband has said, to for its security, but its response has been disproportionate. And the point about international leadership is, if you look at what David Cameron said in 2010, he described the blockade of Gaza as an open prison. Gazan people are suffering, and what there seems to be a collective amnesia.
Of Hamas as well as Israel?
Of course, these groups. The point is that the public in Palestinians are suffering, and the international community has a responsibility to respond to the needs of those people.
I must just ask you, Douglas Murray, on the issue of operations. The last 10 years, there have been a series of ground and air operations by the Israeli Defence Forces on Hamas, and there are at least half a dozen of these. The rockets still continue to come into Israel. So the argument could be, are these Palestinians, innocent Palestinian civilians, losing their lives for nothing? the Israelis are not achieving their aims. The rockets continue from Hamas, and, all right, you are saying that they hide their munitions, their rockets and militant leaders in civilian buildings. But in the end, the Israelis have not stopped the rockets coming in, and more Palestinians are dying.
I mean, anyone interested in bringing peace to the region has to bear in mind the very serious learning curve that Israelis went through when, after the withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, they got not peace from Gaza, but rocket fire, thousands and thousands of rockets. So what they've been trying to do since is to stop the rocket fire. And as I say, since 2007, Hamas did a coup, a military coup in the Gaza, and killed their fellow Palestinians from Fatah and other parties. The Israelis have, on 3 major occasions now, gone in. Now, the problem with this is that the international community tends to allow Israel some weeks in order to achieve the operational objective.
They're going to lose international support,
exactly.
aren't they,
now,
Israel?
The crucial thing, just to add on this, is it is very important that Israel is allowed to win at some point. The international community is quite good at prolonging the conflict precisely by not allowing Israel to achieve its operational objective.
What does a win look like in this case? I mean, can there ever be a military solution to this problem of particularly Gaza and Israel rather than the West Bank and Israel?
It's a platitude, but it happens to be true here. There are going to be no winners here, whatever the outcome. I think that, you know, if I can speak personally, my heart is rather with what Roshanara says. However, I have 2 caveats. One is, I really dislike the tendency, particularly from the media here, always to put Israel in the dock here. The truth of the matter is that the people of Gaza actually voted for Hamas. And they voted knowing what would happen. Hamas has been very clear. It has no intention of making peace with Israel. So actually, you know, this is a horrible, cruel thing to say. This is a result of a democratic outcome. And by the way, the really bigger issue here is Egypt, because that's what's really made the big difference here. So I think...
And Egypt is also worried about being on the border with Gaza.
The peculiar thing is Israel and Egypt, relative to Gaza, are in exactly the same position right now. Yes. So I think that the notion of the way that we tend to report this, which is it's Israel versus suffering Palestinians, is just not right. That's not what this is about.
I mean, Roshanara Ali, what is it that Hamas wants to achieve? I mean, what is it? I mean, Trevor Phillips says that people voted for Hamas as opposed to Fatah, to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. They voted for Hamas knowing that they would be much more hardline. So what is it that they want?
I hope what Trevor's not saying is that by voting for Hamas, those who voted were in some way are now deserve, or, you know, the punishment, collective punishment that is now being espoused.
That's an outrageous
thing to say. Let me finish.
That's an outrageous thing.
You know, that's not what I'm saying at all.
I very much hope not. But the point is that this cycle of violence is going on and on. The fact is that the Palestinians have lived under occupation, and Gaza
They're not under occupation. They have their own state.
The
Gaza
that's nonsense.
is a state,
that's nonsense.
and it is run by Hamas, and they had one election, which, as Trevor said, the people voted for Hamas. Hamas then killed the opposition, and they've never had an election since. But they could have a state.
So
if they wanted a state, they could have a state.
Let Roshanara finish her point. You're saying that they are living under occupation.
There seems to be a bit of amnesia here about the history of what's happening in that region, and the fact that Palestinians don't have a state. They have, you know, lived under occupation. They've lived under attack, and what we need is rapidly, in order to secure peace, which is rapidly eluding this region. We need the international community. We need leaders in America and European Union to work together to resume negotiations and to, first of all, bring an end to this conflict.
Well,
and
the end of the conflict will be fastest brought about by Hamas being thrown out of the West Bank by the Palestinians of theEst Bank, or by any other force available. We've got to remember this. The two-state solution, such as it is, and it's a dream, but it's still a possible dream if you talk about the West Bank.
Do the Israelis genuinely believe in that?
Yes, I think they do, with the West Bank. The thing that is a problem, and is an irreconcilable problem at the moment, is what you do with Hamas, which wants to annihilate the Jewish state and does not want peace. That is a problem.
The real problem here is the agenda is now being controlled by people who don't want peace, whether it is the settlers on the West Bank or it's Hamas.
right.
That's the problem.
I can
How do
assure
we
you
wrest the
settlers do
agenda
not.
out of the
Do
hands
you
of
think this
those
attack
groups of
will
people?
underscore
Either way, I'm not
the
saying-
message of the far right in Europe, at least, of the incompatibility of Islam and the West, or Western values?
That's a pretty atrocious question, if I may say so. We're about 24 hours away from 12 people being gunned down in a newspaper office in the centre of Paris, in a European city, because they offended, allegedly, Islamic blasphemy laws which France, Britain and other European countries do not have and do not believe in and do not follow. And for you to turn the question immediately, not on the people who've been massacred because of asserting their rights as European French citizens, but onto the alleged terrible discrimination of the French is really quite despicable.
So I didn't ask you anything about discrimination of the French. Let me repeat the question in case...
You went straight onto the alleged backlash.
Let me ask you the question again in case you didn't understand it. Do you think this attack... We are in our news bulletins talking in more detail about the actual attack. What you were invited to discuss in this show are the implications of what might follow the attack. Will it underscore the message of those who say there is an incompatibility between Western values and Muslim values?
No, you want to paint the narrative which you think turns immediately not from the attackers, but on the French society, which you would like to portray. I'm giving you my answer, so why don't you listen to it? Which you would like to portray as somehow anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic or anything like this. Let's start from the fact that 12 people were massacred because European citizens asserted their right, which they have every right to do, to draw Mohammed just as they have the right to draw any other historical figure, which they believe in or don't believe in, it doesn't matter. They have that right. I don't think at this stage whether, a discussion of the far right in France or anything like that is really the point. The point is people were killed and gunned down for doing their job as journalists and cartoonists in a free society.
Okay.
In countries like Britain and France, most of us are not Muslims, and we do not believe in Mohammed as the founder of any faith that we follow. People are Christians, atheists, all sorts of things. You cannot expect, and this is the crucial thing, Muslims should not expect non-Muslims to abide by their own belief systems. You can yourself decide, you as a Muslim do not want to depict Mohammed. But the idea that is coming along in Europe at the moment is a growing idea that people who are not Muslims, who do not believe in Mohammed, who do not follow Islam, are also to be have to obey the rules of Islamic blasphemy. And in Europe at the moment, that is the big debate.
You've made that point, Douglas.
Sure. Unfortunately, if an impartial viewer were watching your programme, they'd come away with the idea that all Germans and French people are nascent fascists waiting to expel Muslims. Actually, you just painted, for a journalist, it's quite shocking. You just painted a completely inaccurate portrait of what is going on in protests in Germany, which in actual fact, if you look at it, are highly specific. Can I finish my point?
Let me correct you on a factual point. I didn't say all Germans or all French are looking to expel Muslims.
But then you decided
and I didn't
say
mention
that
a protest in any particular country. So now that we got the facts straight, please go ahead.
Your incredibly biased portrayal of European citizens starts from your misportrayal of people turning out at protests as being against all Muslims or wanting to expel them. And the presenter in Doha, sit in Doha. It really is astonishing. You are painting a picture of Europe which is outrageous. Across the Middle East, cartoons are published every day, every week, with the most disgusting anti-Semitic propaganda, the most disgusting propaganda in them. And you sit in Doha, a not free society, and smear Germans and French people a mere 24 hours after this totalitarian,
I've just corrected you. You don't seem to be hearing these, so let me correct you again. Sorry, sir. I did not say the words all Germans or all French are against or calling for the expulsion of Muslims. That never came out my mouth. I said there are protests in which there have been protests by some in Europe, a minority, who are calling for exclusivity.
And they're against Salafists. Do you not follow any details? The German protests are against Salafists. There is a problem in Europe, sir, and the problem is of Islamic fundamentalism. There is now also a secondary problem, which is that many people who do not like the Islamic fundamentalists are objecting to it. I suggest we unite in sorting out the first primary problem in order to also prevent the secondary problem from ever growing.
Okay.
But we have to portray this accurately.
Exactly.
And you as a journalist should be doing that.
We are doing that, and I thank you for your participation in this show.
It doesn't sound like it, and it's all very well
perhaps you could
for Al Jazeera from Doha to do this, but really.
Do you believe that what has happened today is a fringe example of the behaviour of a few Muslims, or do you in the far right, 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 or do you in the far right believe that this is an example of why Muslims are incompatible with European culture?
I will answer it because I'm a free person and a free European in a free society. And I can tell you that the primary problem is people who walk into offices and gun people down. There will be people in Europe, and I hope that they do not grow in number, who will object to that in a particularly unpleasant way. I hope that we all unite in stopping the fascist Islamists who turn up to offices and disgrace the name